Hey everyone, Dorm here, and welcome back to my series on the Pokemon Emerald ROM hack, Inclement Emerald. In the last episode, you could say that Roxanne had us stuck between a rock tomb and a hard place, but after a few attempts, we were able to win, earning ourselves that stone badge. In today's episode, we're going to continue our quest to collect all the gym badges. Leaving Rustboro, I'm stopped by the Devon employee we previously met in the Petalburg Woods. Once again, Team Aqua is up to no good, and the Devon parts have been stolen. He charges us with their safe return, and not really being given a choice, we head towards where the villain ran off to. But before that, I take a look at my party and realize that everyone is pretty much knocked out, so I head back to the Pokemon Center for some quick healing. While I'm there, I wanted to take a look at our Move Tutor NPC that was added in this ROM hack and see what moves he could offer me now that I have the Stone Badge. One of the moves that was available was Vacuum Wave. I decided that move would be a nice option for Riolu to learn, so I teach it to her. I also teach my Dartrix Covet, as it's a stronger move than Tackle, and the bonus item ceiling could be useful. To add some more coverage to the team, I opt to teach Ralts the Shockwave move. It's a nice electric type move that can't miss. Further down the list of moves that I can learn, I see Air Cutter, a move that is stronger than my Dartrix's Peck, so I teach that one to her as well. Satisfied with the new moves that I've acquired, I decide that it's time to advance the story and actually help the Devon employee with his Team Aqua problem. Acting as if I were an enemy stand user, the Aqua Grunt sees I'm approaching him and prepares for battle with a kidnapped Wingull at his side. This Grunt battle starts off with the typical Carvana. I lead with Riolu and start with my newly acquired Vacuum Wave. It does great damage, but doesn't quite kill. He opts for Aqua Jet, which would have gone first if Vacuum Wave didn't also have priority, and it's here that I find out what ability Carvana does have: Speed Boost. Anyway, to make this fight even more annoying, the Carvana goes into Protect, stalling for another turn and getting another boost to its speed. Then, out of what I can only assume was desperation, the Carvana tries to go for yet another Protect, but this one fails naturally, and my Riolu finishes the job. Next up is Skrelp. We've dealt with this guy before. Just like last time, I don't have any super effective moves at my disposal, so I decide to go for a workup to make the most out of my attacks. Unfortunately, the Skrelp goes for Acid and gets a crit, putting my Riolu in a dangerous spot. Not wanting her to die and lose any friendship, I decide to swap into Ralts, since its Shockwave would be super effective. Coming off the swap, my Ralts takes a bubble for just a little bit of damage. I queue out Shockwave, and to my surprise, Ralts actually outspeeds. The next move from Skrelp is Acid, which is super effective against us. Somehow we survive on 1 HP and manage to finish Skrelp with another Shockwave. Hey, look at that, Riolu got a level. Lastly, the Grunt sends out Grimer. Not wanting Ralts to faint and miss out on EXP, I swap into Dartrix. I first go for Ominous Wind just to see what kind of damage it would do. Dartrix tanks the incoming super effective Venishocks and manages to KO after 2 Air Cutters. After the battle, Riolu evolved into Lucario and learned Bullet Punch. Awesome. Having defeated the Grunt, he hands over the Devon parts and Pico the Wingull is saved. With Mr. Briny, or at least he's called that, in our debt, he and Pico return to his cottage by the Petalburg Woods. Having completely forgotten about the poor Devon employee, I fly back to Rustboro and heal up the team. After that, I remember that he's waiting for me, so I head back up to where he was. Sure enough, he's waiting there for me and I return the Devon parts. As thanks, he does give me some Dream Balls. These special Pokeballs change a caught Pokemon's ability into its hidden ability. These can be really useful. After saving the day, the Devon employee asks us to come back with him to his office. Once there, he pretty much forces us to take the Devon parts to Slateport and then has us meet with his company president, Mr. Stone. He figures that since we're on our way to Slateport, we might as well make a stop in Dewford where his son, Steven, is hanging out, to deliver a letter to him. As compensation for this task, the president gifts us our very own Pokenav. Now, if you've played the original games, you know this item well. It serves as both a regional map and a device to call other trainers on and rematch them later on. On my way out of the building, I stop by the second floor and speak with one of the scientists to find out that he's able to revert EVs back into EV once they've evolved. And they get to keep the moves that they've learned after evolving. That's pretty neat. Once outside, we're stopped by a scientist who upgrades our Pokenav to be able to make calls to other trainers. A very handy feature. To try it out, he has us give the president a call on the Pokenav. It's really cool that we have the ability in this game to instantly connect with others over voice. Why, with this technology, we don't have to send letters anymore. After that, Roxanne stops us to tell us that not only can other trainers be registered on the Pokenav, but other Pokemon can as well. She allows us to register her Anorith so that we can always use Cut, even if we don't have a Pokemon in our party that knows it. This is a really cool quality of life improvement, and I am here for it. I immediately know where I want to use Cut first, but on my way over there, we're stopped by our rival May. She asks if we want to battle, and even though this battle is optional, I want to see how tough the ROM hack has made her, so I accept. May leads with Swallow, and I, not really knowing what she's going to lead with, start out with Lucario. Knowing that I could resist any flying type moves she might throw our way, I have Lucario start with Work Up to get that +1 attack and special attack. My prediction was on the money. Even though Swallow outspeeds, Aerial Ace doesn't do that much damage, and Lucario got the stat boost without sacrificing too much health. Next I go for Metal Claw, hoping to get an attack buff. No such luck, but with the Work Up buff, it does good damage. On the next turn, I opt for Vacuum Wave so that Lucario goes first and avoids any more damage. 1 down, 3 to go. Up next, May goes into her ace, Combusken. With no real options here, I decide to use Vacuum Wave so Lucario can go first and get some damage in. The +1 attack made it where Vacuum Wave did just under half, and Combusken knocked out Lucario with a super effective Flame Charge and picked up a boost in speed. For my next Pokemon, I decided for some reason that Dartrix was the right play, completely ignoring Combusken's fire typing. With the boosted speed, Combusken gets off another Flame Charge, doing huge damage to my Dartrix. Fortunately, the Air Cutter I opted for was much more than enough to secure the KO. Next up, May sends out a Staryu. I thought this would be an easy win, but I quickly found out that her Staryu outsped and Dartrix was knocked into the red. Staryu just barely hangs on against the super effective Razor Leaf, and on the next turn, knocks out my Dartrix with another Psywave. Next up, I swap into Ralts, since I know it has a Shockwave for that super effective damage. But before I can use it, Staryu outspeeds again and hits with a Bubble Beam to do just under half Ralts' health. Thankfully, Shockwave takes out Staryu and we move on to May's last Pokemon. I'm surprised to see that her last one is Steenie, not for any particular reason, but mostly because I can't remember the last time I even thought about Steenie. Not 100% sure of its typing, I go for a Disarming Voice, but before it goes off, Steenie outspeeds and ends Ralts with a Razor Leaf. That was also a crit. Running out of options, I pivot into Nincada to make use of its Bug-type moves. I go for Bug Bite to start, but get outsped, and Steenie uses Acupressure to raise its attack by multiple stages. The Bug Bite is super effective and deals great damage, almost knocking it out. On the next turn, I opt for another Bug Bite to finish the job, and thanks to Nincada's Quick Claw, we go first and finish the fight. After the fight, May drops some less than subtle hints as to what we should do next, and we move on. I went back down towards Petalburg Woods to make use of my new Cut ability. The first thing we come across is an Audinite, which means if we come across an Audino, we can Mega Evolve it later on. Next, I decide to explore the sectioned off parts of the woods that we needed Cut to explore before. When I went to use Cut, I was surprised by a random encounter. Out of the tiny tree came an Apom. I decided that I didn't want it and took it out for the XP. While exploring, I picked up a Miracle Seed, which boosts the power of Grass-type moves, a Great Ball, a Sunstone, and a Leek. Then I came across a Misdreavus that tanked my Bullet Punch. I decided to add them to the teams as I knew Brawly and its Fighting-type Pokemon would be coming up next. Also while in the woods, I happened across the TM for Grass Knot. Neat. After that little detour, it was back to the main quest and we're off to see Mr. Briny. He agrees to take us to Dewford and we're off. Once we get there, he reminds us to meet with Steven and I head up towards the Granite Cave. The first big change to Dewford I notice is the addition of this large, tall grass that normally isn't there. We get stopped by one of the fishermen and he meets us in the grass to challenge us. Something really cool I noticed is that the field is the appropriate type in this battle scene because of the grass we're standing in. After dealing with all the trainers up there, I decided to head back and heal before going on to the cave. While back at the Pokemon Center, I notice an opening in the trees that normally isn't there either, so I go to check it out. It seems to be a new area, Dewford Meadow. Neat. I come across Butterfree Knight? I don't think Butterfree can Mega Evolve in the actual games, so this will be interesting to see. I walk through the meadow a bit, and wouldn't you know it, the next Pokemon I see is a Butterfree, so must be fate, right? That, or the developer of the ROM hack purposely put Butterfree in this meadow? Nah. After a bit of a struggle, I managed to capture this Butterfree and move on. In the meadow, I find the TM for Snarl and decide to check out this new building out here, Dewford Manor. Oh, it's dark in here, so let's use Flash. And we can't use Flash until we beat Brawly. Alright, I'll come back later. I head up to the cave, and once inside, a hiker gives me the HM for Flash. It's nice to have just in case, but seeing as our Pokemon who can use Flash can just use it without knowing it, this might not be the most useful HM. The journey through the cave was relatively uneventful. However, a few notable things: Lucario learned Power Up Punch, I found a TM for Brick Break, and I also found a hidden Everstone. As a reward for delivering the letter to him, Steven gives us the TM for Steel Wing. This could be useful later on, but we'll see. Once that's done, I decided that it was time to head over to Slightport and deliver the Devon parts. The first thing I notice is these little bumps in the sand. They're interesting to me because they definitely aren't in the original game. Oh, it's a Pokemon. And a Sandygast too. I decide against adding it to the team and take it out for the XP. After a few trainers from the beach are taken out, I make my way to the person I'm supposed to deliver the parts to, but instead of taking them, he instead asks me to give them to Captain Stern. Oh well, can't be helped I guess. Heading through town, I come across Brawley, who is waiting in line with the Aquagrunts to get into the museum. Upon talking to him, he decides to head back to the gym so I can challenge him for his badge. Before heading back, I decide to do some shopping in the nearby market. I pick up the TM for Bulldoze, and I pick up a couple proteins. In this game, the medicines raise your Pokemon's IVs by 8. I'm not sure if that's how it functions in the main game, but these will be useful. I also found an Alakazite. With all that out of the way, I began to head back to Dewford Town. On the way back, I decided it would be worthwhile to get the 6 soda pops from the Seashore House. The battles themselves were fairly easy, and afterwards, Ralts evolved into Curlia, which is nice since we're about to go up against a gym. Seeing as I haven't quite hit the level cap for this gym, 25, I feel it's in my best interest to train up the whole party before challenging Brawley, since Roxanne has now given me trust issues. While training, my time pole grew to level 25, which is also the level it evolves into Palpitoad, so that was really nice. My Nikata started to evolve, but I remembered that my party was full and that would prevent me from getting Shedinja, so I stopped the evolution and emptied a spot in the party. Now that I'm sufficiently prepared for Shedinja, I go back out into the field and continue to grind. I get Nincada up to level 21, and it evolves into Ninjask and Shedinja. Now that I've got my team, I decided to get a little more training in by taking on all the gym trainers in Brawley's gym. These fights actually go pretty well, and I get some good XP for the team. One of the trainers had a Jangmo-O, if that's how you say that, a Pokemon that I really like. The bad thing is that it was somehow ready for my Shedinja and took it out with a Shadow Claw. Him being ready for my Shedinja made me realize that even with the buffs, maybe Shedinja's not a good choice for my team. Before I face off with Brawley, I decided to swap out Shedinja in favor for the Misdreavus that I caught back in Petalburg Woods. Seeing the Misdreavus was a bit underleveled, I figured my best bet would be to do a little more grinding in the Dewford Meadow. During this grinding session, I came across a female Combi and I realized I might be looking at Ninjask's replacement. Vespiquen is a pretty powerful Pokemon, and in this game, its defense and special defense were given some nice buffs. So I feel like in the long run, Vespiquen might be a stronger choice, so I add Combi to our team. After this, I healed back up and returned to the field to continue the grind. While doing so, our Combi hit level 21 and became a Vespiquen. Already our new plan is coming to fruition. Getting a bit bored with the Pokemon in the meadow, I head into the Dewford Manor once more to grind off the Pokemon in there. In the manor, I come across a few different Pokemon, but one that really stood out to me was Litwick. I love this Pokemon. It's so cute, and its final evolution, Chandelure, is a very strong Ghost Fire type. I even use this Pokemon on my current team in Pokemon Shield. Since I love Litwick so much, it's time to say goodbye to Misdreavus and hello to our very good Candle Boy. Girl. With my team now more or less finalized for Brawley, I make one more trip out into the field to do some grinding and get everyone in fighting shape. Once everyone is at the level cap, I feel I'm as prepared as I'm gonna be, and I decide to make our first attempt against Brawley. He starts the fight with Meditite. Right off the bat, we get to lower its attack by 1 stage thanks to Vespiquen's Intimidate ability, which was added to it in this ROM hack. I begin with Gust, knowing this will be a super effective move against the fighting Psychic type Pokemon. Meditite goes first and sets up a light screen which will impede the impact of my special moves for a few turns. Speaking of, the Gust that I chose is a special type move, so even though it's super effective, the damage is lowered. On the next turn, Meditite sets up Reflect, so now physical moves are also weakened. I continue to lay down Gusts, as it's my only super effective choice. On the third turn, with Meditite's HP low enough to knock it out, I opt for Fellstinger since I get an attack boost if the move kills. Still outspeeding me, the Meditite does get a Zen Headbutt in, which was a crit, doing a bit more than half of Vespiquen's health. Fortunately, Fellstinger was able to finish off Meditite, getting me that +1 attack. For his next Pokemon, Brawley sends out Hitmonchan. I go for another Gust, being my best choice, but once again, Vespiquen is outsped and Hitmonchan lands a devastating Ice Punch. Somehow Vespiquen holds on with just 2 HP and Vespiquen is able to get one last Gust in. Despite this, Brawley shows us just how much of a sweaty tryhard he is, and his Hitmonchan eats a Koba Berry. a berry that reduces the damage of super effective flying type moves. Between the light screen and his berry, this gust does about as much damage as a light breeze. Next up, I send out Kirlia. I know she won't be able to take too many hits, so I opt for the Hypnosis into as many attacks as I can manage strat. Before I can start that up, Hitmonchan outspeeds and lands with a nasty Thunder Punch, dealing a bit more than half of Kirlia's HP. With a bit of good luck, the Hypnosis lands and it's bedtime for Hitmonchan. I start off with Psybeam, and despite being super effective, it doesn't do great damage. The next turn I go for another one, and it does about the same, bringing Hitmonchan down to less than half. On the next turn, the light screen wears off, and instead of going for Psybeam again, I decided to try Draining Kiss to see what kind of damage it would do, and maybe recover a decent amount of Kirlia's lost health. To my absolute shock, it was super effective and finished off the Hitmonchan. I had actually forgotten that Fairy beats Fighting type. Feeling a bit dumb for forgetting that Fairy beats Fighting, I'm thankful to at least see Reflect wear off before Brawly sends out his next Pokemon, Breloom. Before I can use Draining Kiss again, Breloom outspeeds and knocks Kirlia out with a few hits from Bullet Seed. Next I'm sending out Dartrix, but before I can do that, Breloom randomly gets poisoned. I have no idea why this happened, but I think it might be holding a Toxic Orb. Once Dartrix is out, I accidentally picked Razor Leaf, for some reason, and just to add insult to injury, it outspeeds and uses Bulk Up for a +1 to attack and defense. Before the next turn, Breloom is healed by its Poison Heal ability, and that pretty much confirms to me that it's using a Toxic Orb. On the next turn, I make sure to go for that Air Cutter this time, but not before Breloom can work in another Bulk Up. Despite now being +2 in attack and defense, the 4 times effective Air Cutter is enough to one-shot. Next up comes Dewott, and this goes about as well for them as you'd expect. They outspeed for a super effective Air Slash that does roughly a third of Dartrix's HP, and then Dartrix lands a crit that rocks Dewott but stops just shy of the KO. Next turn is more of the same. Dewott landing another big Air Slash and Dartrix landing a decisive Razor Leaf. This one is obviously more than enough to KO, and Dewott goes down. This fight was looking great. Brawly's down to his last 2 Pokemon, and I thought this would be a first try. But then, Brawly sends out his ace, Hariyama, and things begin to get a bit scary. I try to land an Air Cutter, but Hariyama outspeeds and lands a knockoff that finishes Dartrix. Next, I try to go into some cheese strats with Litwick, using the Will-O-Wisp Hex combo. If you don't know, Hex is a ghost type move that does more damage if the opposing Pokemon is affected by a status condition. Unfortunately, Hariyama outspeeds again and lands a nasty knockoff that's super effective, stripping Litwick of the Eviolite that I gave it and doing massive damage. To make matters worse, Litwick missed the Will-O-Wisp. Next turn, I just try to get some damage in, so I go with Hex, but Hariyama just quickly dispatched my poor, sweet Litwick. Next, I pivot into Palpitoad, hoping I can tank some hits, but sadly the Mudshot missed and Palpitoad went down to 4 hits from an arm thrust. With only Lucario left, I try to raise my attack with a Power-Up Punch, and while that does work out, it doesn't do much damage and Lucario is knocked out by a super effective arm thrust. Having tasted defeat, I go back to the drawing board for my team choice. I grab Nidorina, who was pretty much the star of my team last gym, and level her up to the new cap. Once that's done, I use a Moonstone and evolve her into a Nidoqueen. Now I had my own tank against Hariyama. I realized that even though Lucario is one of my favorite Pokemon on my team, its weakness to fighting type moves was just too much of a hazard and decided she needed to sit this gym out. Nidoqueen would go in her place. I also thought to teach Nidoqueen Brick Break, thinking it would help with Meditite's screens. With this new team in place and feeling much more confident having seen most of Brawly's team, I return to Dewford to challenge him again. This next attempt doesn't quite go as well as the first one. To show you a taste of how bad that went, here you can see me try to have the big brain read on Meditite's screen, but instead I outspeed and do very little damage. During the second attempt I do get to see who Brawly's last Pokemon is, and it's a Lucario. Unfortunately, this attempt ends in failure too, and I'm sent packing once more. So I try again, and I lose again. But hey, 4th time's the charm, right? I'm pretty sure that's how the saying goes. Anyway, with this attempt, I try to recreate the first run that I almost saw me taking home the badge. Things start off pretty familiar, but this time, Meditite sets up Reflect first, so I deal some pretty big damage off the initial Gust. He does, however, get the light screen set up as well, so I just go for Gust again to end the fight. Next up is his usual pick, Hitmonchan. Not really having too many options, I go for Gust, knowing his Koba Berry will make this useless. And as usual, he outspeeds and lands a big Thunder Punch, doing a little less than half of Vespiqun's HP. Next turn I try for Gust again, having gotten rid of the Kubba Berry, but even without the damage reduction from the berry, the light screen makes this Gust pretty negligible. Finally, Hitmonchan ends Vespiqun's struggle with another Thunder Punch. In line with trying to recreate my first attempt, I send out Kirlia for the Hypnosis strat. Thankfully, the Hypnosis hits, and instead of wasting turns working him down with Psybeam, I immediately start with Draining Kiss. It does nice damage, and I recover some much needed HP while Hitmonchan sleeps. Next turn is much more of the same, but this time Kirlia lands a crit. Sadly, this does not kill, and on the following turn, Hitmonchan wakes up and outspeeds with an Ice Punch, but thankfully Kirlia held on to land one more Draining Kiss to seal the deal in this fight. Next up we see Breloom, and much like the first time, before I can do anything, it's over for Kirlia with a single Bullet Seed. Naturally, I pivot into Dartrix and this time make sure to use the right move, taking care of Breloom handily. Next up is Dewott, and this time is again much more of the same, a trading of Air Slashes and Razor Leafs until one of us falls. Luckily Dewott fell first and Brawly once again brings out his ace, Hariyama. This time, however, I manage to outspeed and land a single Air Cutter before Hariyama makes quick work of my Dartrix. Next up, I try for the Will-O-Wisp Hex strat again, and it pretty much goes as well as last time, except for the fact that Will-O-Wisp actually lands this time, burning Hariyama and lowering its attack. After taking a super effective knockoff, of course. Before I can even try Hex, Hariyama outspeeds and snuffs out Litwick with another knockoff. Wanting to save Nidoqueen as my last resort, I send out Palpitoad and opt for a little cheese. I try Supersonic, and to my surprise, it actually lands. Because of the ticking burn damage, Hariyama does use its held Citrus Berry to restore some health, bringing him back over half. But the good news is that on this turn, Hariyama does hit itself in confusion, and that, combined with the burn damage, pretty much brings him back to where he was before. Very nice. Sensing the Arm Thrust coming up, I come up with the 200 IQ strat of switching to Nidoqueen to tank the hit, and sure enough, as soon as I swap, Hariyama opts for Arm Thrust, which doesn't do too much damage. I choose Poison Fang to get some stab damage, and I come just shy of knocking out Brawly's Hariyama. Thankfully, the stars aligned for me, and Hariyama took itself out in confusion. And with that, we come down to Brawly's last Pokemon, Lucario. With it being 2-1, I'm feeling pretty good about this attempt. Since I know it's super effective, I start with Brick Break, but before I can land it, Lucario outspeeds and gets a bulk up for that +1 attack and defense. Despite being super effective, Brick Break only does a little less than half, thanks to the bulk up. Second verse, same as the first, I go for another Brick Break while Lucario goes for another bulk up. For the final turn, Lucario decides to attack with Reversal, but this wasn't very effective, and with one last Brick Break, his Lucario falls, earning me the second gym badge. Having defeated Brawly, I decided to do a few more things before moving on. I figured now that I have access to Flash, I could really explore the Dewford Manor. It didn't turn out to be much though. I did find the TM for Curse, a Banetite, and a Dreadplate. Satisfied with my search for now, I flew back to Slateport to finally deliver these Devon parts I had been holding on to. But before that, I did go back and grab Lucario out of the PC, as I feel she will be much more useful for Watson's electric Pokemon in the next gym. After all of that, I then headed to the museum where Captain Stern was in Slateport. I make sure to grab the Thief TM from the Aqua Grunt on the first floor, and then it's upstairs to finally deliver those parts. Upstairs we find Stern, and I try to give him the parts when suddenly we're ambushed by 2 Aqua Grunts. These 2 grunts aren't anything special though. I pretty quickly and easily defeat them both, and once that's done, Archie, the Team Aqua boss, confronts us. I'm pretty sure in the original game, he just spouts some nonsense about how Team Aqua loves the sea and wants to expand it, but then he lets us go. But it looks like we gotta fight him now. He leads with Mightyena, and I start with Lucario. Somehow my team was healed between fighting the 2 grunts earlier. Neat. I start with Force Palm and do awesome damage, being super effective against the Dark-type Mightyena. It even gets the Paralysis to boot. Mightyena retaliates with a Fire Fang, doing a ton of damage, being super effective. The next turn, I just decide to knock him out with a quick Bullet Punch, and we move on to Archie's next Pokemon. And for his next Pokemon, he sends out Crobat. And wait, was that a Master Ball? Come to think of it, did Mightyena come out of a Master Ball too and I just didn't notice? Jeez, either Archie is really trying to flex, or he's just that bad at catching Pokemon and needs the help. Anyway, for this fight, I start with Bullet Punch, seeing as it's one of the only moves that I have that would be effective against Crobat, and it doesn't do too much damage. Crobat responds with an Air Cutter that almost knocks Lucario out, but stops short. Realizing that this is probably Lucario's last turn in this fight, I opt to get as much damage out as I can, and use another Bullet Punch before Crobat finishes the fight with a Giga Drain. Next up, I sent out Curlia since she has moves that would be super effective. Before I can attack though, Crobat outspeeds and lands a super effective Venoshock that does a lot of damage, almost one-shotting us. I decided to make the swap to Palpitoad since its ground typing would be useful in taking poison damage. What I failed to remember was that Giga Drain that ended Lucario was a major problem and took the 4 times effective attack on the next turn. Realizing my mistake, I swap into Litwick next. I lead with Confuse Ray to hopefully buy myself a few turns, and Litwick tanks a Venoshock. Unfortunately, Crobat manages to attack through the confusion and hits with Air Cutter. On the bright side, it doesn't do too much damage and Litwick still has over half HP. For this turn, I decided to go with Will-O-Wisp to set up for Hex, and thankfully it lands, burning the Crobat. This turned out to be the best case scenario for me, as next turn Crobat hits itself in confusion and I land the Hex to finish it off. His last Pokemon is Sharpedo, also in a Master Ball, and for this one I try to go for the same thing I used with Crobat. I start with Confuse Ray, but before I can use it, Sharpedo uses Aqua Jet, a water-type priority move, and it's lights out for Litwick. But because I believed in my little candle buddy, she left me with one last gift, and that was Flame Body activating. Because Sharpedo made contact, Litwick's Flame Body ability left it with a burn. Nice. Rest easy, Litwick. Looking to end things quickly, I swap into my partner Pokemon Dartrix and go for Razor Leaf. Archie was prepared for this though, and his Sharpedo attacks with Ice Fang, which is 4 times effective, and lands a crit. But to Dartrix's credit, she tanked that move and held on to one-shot the Sharpedo with Razor Leaf. And with that, we have successfully defeated Archie. Having sent Archie packing, I deliver the parts to CERN and he heals my team for me. I think that's all the time I have for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. The support so far has been great, and I look forward to making more videos for you guys. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, or advice, feel free to leave me a comment down below and make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Anyways guys, I'm gonna head out. I'll see you in the next one.